go from not really playing the sport 18 months ago to then being put forward for national team camps across the summer of, I think it was 2020 at the very beginning point. It was awful. It's completely and utterly life-changing. If I don't get the type 1 diabetes right, my levels are going to be too low or too high, and ultimately that's just going to affect my performance.
I am Jordan Rushworth, host of the Athlete Sit Down with Sport Endorse, where we chat to inspiring athletes to hear their unique journey into the world of sports. Sport Endorse are a global leader in connecting brands with the ideal athlete to forge powerful partnerships and increase exposure for both sides alike. With access to over 5,000 athletes across 90 different disciplines, Sport Endorse is your go-to platform to find a perfect athlete fit for your social media campaign, brand ambassador role, or keynote speaking engagement. Welcome back to another episode of the Athlete Sit Down, where we dive into the inspiring stories of elite athletes from around the world. Today we have a very special guest joining us. Not only is he a Welsh international futsal player in his own right, but he has been living with type 1 diabetes since 1999 and has now set up a not-for-profit organisation called the Diabetes Football Community to support football players playing with diabetes. Hi Chris, how are you today?
Yeah, really good, Jordan. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. So to start off, can you tell us a bit about your journey in football and how you got started in the sport?
Yeah, I think it probably with the same as many other kids out there. It's kicking the ball around in the garden with your parents and kicking it around on a patch of grass not far from your house, and just getting used to, I guess, that kind of football coordination, which lots of kids seem to have, and I think I was exposed to it in a similar way as a young lad. And then just I suppose my dad could see that I was playing okay. It was coming naturally to me, and wanted to give me an opportunity to play further. And I got involved in local training camps on a Saturday morning with one of the local non-league teams that were doing the kind of age group academy stuff. I think it was Redditch United, which is a team close to where I'm from. And I just got playing there and regularly, and then found a team. I think that was just training to start with, and then found a team and just flying from there, really. Just as soon as I was exposed to it, loved it. It was weird because I wanted to be a goalkeeper as a young lad, and my dad was quite clear I wasn't going to be tall enough to be a goalkeeper. He's kind of 5'10". My grandfather was not that tall either, and you're just going, yeah, it's not going to happen for you being a goalkeeper. And as it turns out, it was a good decision because I've ended up being about 5'10" as well, so I never would have been a goalkeeper. So I was sort of coached into being an outfield player. Loved it, just got involved, and when the ball was at my feet, I was the happiest I could be, and loved it. Kept doing it. Got involved with another local team, and that was it then. And playing regularly then on a Sunday morning until things started to change a couple of years later. So football I found first, and then I had something else obviously come into my world. We were talking about type 1 diabetes a few years later, but football was there from the age of about 6, I reckon 5 or 6. I was playing regularly.
Yeah, no, that's sort of, I think, normal for most kids, especially myself as well. In sort of the UK, it is sort of brought in at that sort of age. But how tall are goalkeepers in futsal? Because maybe you could have made it there.
If I'd have known about futsal at the age that I was playing or started playing football, I probably would have gone down the goalkeeping route. Futsal, I don't know what it was, but I loved being a goalkeeper. And most futsal goalkeepers are not as tall as the football goalkeepers. There's probably a lower centre of gravity required, I think, to the game. More agility, but it feels like it's that needing more movement required. And some of the goalkeepers are very very adept at playing out on the court as well, and in amongst the team and receiving the ball to feet and being part of the playing team. with the nature of the tactics of the game. So yeah, it's something that if I'd have known about, I probably would have gone down the route of being a futsal goalkeeper.
And how did you sort of make that change from football to futsal?
It came a lot later in life than actually I would have preferred it to have been, and I think that then shows in the way that I've kind of had to be a bit of a square peg in a round hole kind of thing coming into the sport, because I didn't find it till I was about 23. And at this point, I'd played non-league football. I played in the part-time game. I'd played for the university football team. Never found futsal at university, which is where a lot of people find it. There wasn't a futsal team at the university that I was at in that moment. And just grown up completely playing the 11-a-side game, but knowing about futsal when I was about 17 or 18, but just not being able to find the opportunities to play it. So it was just by chance, really, that at 22, 23, I was playing for Hershel Town non-league team in the area. And one of the lads that I was playing with was a futsal player. He'd played at university. He knew of a local club that were playing and doing the sport. And he said, the way you play football, you might be okay at this. You might do well at this. You'll probably enjoy it. And I said to him, I've always been looking for this chance to play the sport. I'd heard about it. I thought about it. I'd always been a player that liked to use both feet, be quite technical. I was never gifted physically. As I said, I'm not huge in height. I was relatively quick accelerating, but my top speed, I wasn't rapid. So I was having to make the most of other things. And it was always about technical stuff. And it was always about reading the game well, good control, technique, those sides of things I focus on, which actually suits itself really well to the game of futsal. So yeah, just finding that opportunity. I came across a player in my local non-league team I was playing for, and he opened the doors to where I could play, and that was it. And I think the first season I joined Birmingham Tigers Futsal Club, playing in the National Futsal League in the Midlands, and I was doing it alongside 11-a-side at the time, so I was like twin tracking, they call it. So I was playing non-league on a Saturday and then futsal on a Sunday, and I probably had my best season in non-league football, probably coming at a time where I was at an age as well, like 23, 24, where I was starting to come into my own in the adult game. So it coincided with that. And also, I think I was player of the season for Birmingham Tigers in my first year playing futsal. So it just all it tied in together really nicely, and the two complemented each other. But I ultimately knew from that exposure to futsal there that if I wanted to play at a high level of futsal or push myself to go a bit further than where I was, I would probably need to put football down, because it just took too much to try and do both. They require quite a lot, and I needed to focus on one.
Yeah, and you obviously decided to focus on the futsal, which turned out to be a great decision. Obviously, you've now played for the Welsh international team, and sort of wanted to get to know how you sort of got that news when it happened, and how you received it.
Yeah, so it was quite a long, protracted sort of process, because I the first opportunity I got to train with the national team was after that season. I said I'd been player of the season at what was for my club at what was the top level that I could play at in England. And one of the coaches kind of put me forward, said, I qualify for both nations. I qualify for Wales and England. And then we'll put you forward for both to see if there's any interest in you playing or going and getting involved in the national team in either nation. And I got a call straight away from the Wales team. They'd obviously heard from the coach, one of the coaches in our league, that had said my performances were of a high standard and potentially you'd look at him. I went and I got that shout, and it was a bit surreal. You go from not really playing the sport 18 months ago to then being put forward for national team camps across the summer of, I think it was 2015, I think it was. And before I know it, I was involved in, I think it was 3 or 4 national team camps in Newport at the Velodrome, which was a real eye opener to the sport and what it takes to go to the next level from where we were or where I was playing. And I'd done reasonably well in the camps across the summer, but I then picked up what was a bad injury. I tore a hip flexor, and I think I was there. I could have been there or thereabouts with getting a shout for friendlies in 2015. We were about to play Holland, and I missed out. And I actually thought I'd probably missed my opportunity. These things land, and you sometimes only get a shot at something like that.
Yeah.
And it can go away and never come back. So I thought I'd missed it. I'd got a bad injury. I was out for 3 or 4 months. There wasn't much conversation. Things had gone quiet. I went back to playing non-league, and then again out of the blue, a little bit, the national team management got in contact at the end of the season. Obviously knew the severity of the injury and thought maybe we'll give him the chance to get going again this season, and we'll revisit it the following year. And then the same thing, national team camps again, and this time I was able to stay fit, stay healthy, and prove what I could do enough to get myself into the squad. And I was picked for the first time in October 2016 to play Latvia at the Newport Velodrome. So yeah, I was picked in the squad there for the first time in the friendlies, and then followed that with being picked again for the home nations in 2016, which again was held in Wales, in Cardiff, first home nations tournament. So yeah, it was a whirlwind, lots of ups and downs, injuries as athletes often go through, and you face in sport, and all managing it while I was trying to come back from those challenges, but also with the difficulties of facing life with type 1 diabetes on a regular basis in what is that mainstream environment where nobody else is living with a hidden disability or a chronic health condition. And to do it, you're basically an outlier in that situation. You've got something which makes it challenging, and you have to really work hard to manage to even be in the arena, let alone then putting on a performance that gets you to play at an elite level in any sport, in any context.
No, and you mentioned it there. Obviously, you have been doing all this success, or getting all the success, whilst having type 1 diabetes. So when were you first diagnosed with this condition, and sort of how did it initially affect your football career or your futsal career?
Well, definitely football when it arrived. Yeah. Futsal being as late as it was in my time playing, it was definitely football. I was diagnosed in 1999, so we're staring down, actually not far off, almost the 25th anniversary of my diagnosis. So it's been a long time. There's been an awful lot of change in that time in terms of managing the condition. But at the very beginning point, it was awful. It's completely and utterly life changing, life altering. You go from this carefree child to somebody that now has to inject insulin every single day at a particular time, and at this time had to eat similar, almost had to eat meals at the same time every single day, almost had to try and eat very similar things every single day to try and make it work, try and find a routine that allowed you to do the things that you wanted to do. So as that arrives in my life, it coincides with me doing okay at football. I was starting to show some promise and starting to play well for my sort of junior team. And it made it difficult for the first 2, 3, 4 years. I was just very inconsistent. One weekend I'd play well, and the diabetes would play ball and allow me to play well. And then other weekends, it just was all over the place, and extremely frustrating for me, for my family, because you just couldn't find any consistency in it. You couldn't find any way of making it work, and it was hampering what I thought I could do. And obviously the dream was to be a professional footballer. I think everybody is in that space as a kid kicking a ball around. But if I couldn't do that, then it was just to play as high a level as I could, whether that was in the non-league game, whether that was finding a different route in futsal, was just to get the opportunity to do it as high as I could, to prove that type 1 diabetes wasn't the thing that was going to define what I could do as a footballer or a futsal player. It was me that was going to define that. And obviously at the start, very challenging, but we learned as we went along, and really, really worked out as we were doing it how to make it happen, looking at routines, working as hard as we could to make some sense of it, to analyze the trends, and to try and to make it easier each weekend that we went by. I think that was the aim for us, to try and we started with a plan. We would alter the plan, and each weekend hoping to just get a little bit closer to getting the best from me.
Yeah, and you mentioned there that you sort of had some sort of routines where you'd eat at the same time every day. Can you share some of the other strategies or routines you sort of developed over time?
Yeah, we started to work out, and this was when I began on mixture insulin, which was in its word, mixed insulin means it's quite variable in its response. Whereas then when I moved to what is the routine that's commonly used now on multiple daily injections, which is, they call it basal bolus, which means you have one background injection a day, which kind of just sits there and supports the body's need for insulin across a 24-hour period. And then you would inject just for meals, which actually then means you've got a bit more flexibility, timing begins to change, and also the insulin that you would take for the meal would only last for sort of 3 hours. So this was then I started to build more of a structure around approaching games, which it really helped to then getting to manage it at a, if you like, trying to push it towards more elite or higher levels, or trying to push myself to where I could get to in semi-pro football. I started to go, right, well, I need to eat a meal 3 hours before, because then it means the insulin that I've taken for that food is going to be mostly out of the system by the time I come to, say, my 3 o'clock kickoff. So I would eat lunch at 12. I would eat a similar amount of food, similar foods as well, to enable me to almost second guess my levels my glucose levels as I came to the match itself. So it's building out those routines, and it would be the same for night games as well, midweek games. I remember going to work and people would be like, why are you eating your dinner at 4 p.m. in the afternoon? You're trying to finish the day at the office. And I would be eating my dinner at 4 o'clock. And I'd be like, well, I've got a night game tonight and we kick off at 7:45. And you'd be explaining why you're doing it. You're trying to get this insulin you want to take on some food and some energy, but you want the insulin to be mostly out of your system, because then it reduces some of the variability of insulin floating through my system, and potentially causing me to have maybe a low blood glucose level or a high glucose level if I've not got it right. But it gives you a chance to adapt that and change it, and also go into the match with your eyes on the game. It's having less variability before the match means you can start to actually think about the match, where a lot of people will be able to think about all the tactics and the techniques and what the managers said. I couldn't really switch on to much of that on game day, because I was just so focused on, if I don't get the type 1 diabetes right, my levels are going to be too low or too high, and ultimately that's just going to affect my performance. And then I could go on the pitch, play really badly, be dragged off at half time, or not even make it onto the pitch in the first place. So there's I think that's all the tactical stuff that you have to take on as a playing in a part-time environment like that. You have to take it on in the days before, because on game day, for someone like me, it's just completely, I'm immersed in how I manage type 1 to just get on the pitch. And if I didn't do that, there's a chance that I wouldn't make the team the week after because of the performance, or I wouldn't even get on the pitch in the first place.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, is that a lot harder when you go to these competitions abroad, or have you managed to sort of keep it to a certain level now?
Yeah, much more difficult, I think, because in those environments, I had more control. Like, I would individually be able to control a lot of those measures there. I was able to eat at a particular time. I was able to hand pick the food days before. I would be able to set the timings of when I was eating. I would know exactly what I was doing around those routines and those schedules, because those schedules would have been things times I've played at for for years, a 7:45 kickoff on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night is a very common time for a game to be played in the professional setting or the non-league setting. And a 3 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday afternoon is just the absolute norm for what is the English football pyramid. So I could plan for that, and I've been planning for that for years. When you go abroad to a tournament, or when you go abroad to play an international fixture, all of that routine and all of the timings that you have worked to before is taken out of your hands, and somebody else has it. So that's where it becomes difficult, because you don't know the food that's coming your way, you don't know the timings or structure and schedule of the whole. We could be away on a 5-6 day camp, international camp, and they're not going to tell you the ins and outs of that probably until 3 or 4 days before, because they're trying to work it all out themselves. You can get a better idea of when the games will kick off, but ultimately there's lots of stuff which affects the game before it. Anyway, if we train in the morning before a game, you might not know that until a few days before, and that will affect your insulin sensitivity on the day of the game. That will affect how you approach it, what the doses that you'll give yourself. There's just so many things which go into international camps that you're difficult to second guess. So the challenge becomes greater managing a condition like that abroad when everyone else around you hasn't got that challenge to face. They're most people in that elite kind of sporting environment aren't living with a medical condition or a hidden disability. So you're working hard for yourself, but also probably tapping into the medical team's support as well quite frequently, just to make sure you're able to get out there on the court.
Yeah, and obviously you've created this not-for-profit, which we'll go on to in a second. I was just wondering how you mentioned it there, the support. How is the support in sort of the international team and your sort of national team as well? As I said, it is a hidden disability. So is there less support for that, or do you think the support's been good over your career?
I think it's a real mixture, and I think you could look at it as you get more in towards those elite environments, the support is naturally greater. There's more access to physios, there's more access to doctors, and they're all ready. They're ready for this kind of conversation. They are ready to support athletes with their needs, and they want to work out what's best for you. So as you get to those levels of the national teams, they're just there to support you. So that we'll have a conversation. I'll tell them what I need, what I think's going on. They'll give a view as well. They'll understand often. And if they don't, they will be ready to go away and research and look things up and come back to you with their thoughts based on their knowledge of the field or the sport or the medical situation that we're in. So there is a lot more support in that space. As you start at the grassroots level and into probably even part-time non-league, where you might just be dealing with mostly a physio, not a doctor, or a very small medical team compared to where you are with the more elite levels, there is, I would say, less support. It's more self-derived, and I think that really leans into the lack of awareness and knowledge which exists about hidden disabilities or chronic health conditions being a part of the mainstream game. And that's not just mainstream football, that's the mainstream sport in general. There isn't a real uniform way of providing that support or getting it across to people. And because there is no other pathway for someone living with a hidden disability, like there are disability pathways in sport, Paralympics, perfect example, blind football, amputee football, deaf football, there is naturally a way of finding support for people living with those conditions. But because those pathways don't necessarily exist for chronic health conditions or hidden disabilities, you are, as I described it earlier, a square peg in a round hole. You're trying to make yourself fit in an environment which was never created perfectly for you. So that inclusivity and trying to find that and trying to develop it more for people in that space is something that I'm really passionate about. And it's something I found really hard. I've faced in those mainstream environments, I've faced stigma, I've faced stereotypes, I've faced comments, and it's because of a lack of education, a lack of awareness that exists in mainstream environments. So we're we're constantly fighting that battle of what society expects in a mainstream environment in sport where you're pushing for elitism. They don't expect to see medical health conditions in that space. So you've got that to deal with, as well as then the actual physical management of your condition to contend with in a team sport environment. So it's a really interesting one to unpick. It's a really challenging one to unpick, but in some ways we're making some great progress, and there's some amazing role models out there achieving great things in sport with type 1 diabetes, and others with medical conditions as well.
Yeah, and now you've realized that there's a lack of support, and you've created this diabetes football community. What was sort of the turning point that led you to create this?
Well, it comes from my own experiences, as I've just touched on the challenges I faced in both stigma and management, and not ever feeling like I had anywhere to turn or anyone I could speak to or turn to. So feeling alone in an environment like football or sport, I wanted to find others like me. So I think it starts there with the feeling I had, the challenges I faced, and then it comes from obviously my own climbing my own summit, really, if you like, where I probably got to 26, 27 and realised that I wasn't going to be a professional footballer at that point. I'd played in the non-league game, I'd earned some money to play football, and then I'd played international futsal for Wales. I'd represented my country in futsal. I thought that you're probably not going to get a better chance to open up, to talk about what you live with, what you've been through, and also, connect with people and hopefully support people and talk about your own experiences living with the condition and where you've been able to get to in sport. Find others that maybe are doing the same, and then inspire the next generation of those living with type 1 who will probably be finding it as tough as I did growing up with the condition, not finding others that are like them in sport, football, or it could have been other things as well. At the time, I was thinking, wider than that, rugby, tennis, cricket, wherever it is, trying to inspire those next generation of young people with type 1, because it was tough. They are, as we've just described and talked about, they are playing with a hidden disability in a mainstream environment for the most part, and it's not easy. So by creating this vehicle and this community and this not-for-profit, we've able to generate opportunities for them to come together, for them to learn from each other, to educate the masses. We're trying to work on raising the profile of diabetes in sport, and really just to provide that space for people to turn to when they feel it's difficult or they're finding it tough. They can learn management techniques from each other, but they can also get that reassurance from chatting to people who actually understand what it's like to try and do the things that they're doing. So, and that's where the diabetes football community was born out of all of that. It then, we started with a Twitter or an X profile, as it's now called, and then it develops into a Facebook page, a website. There's a podcast that we created a few years ago that we dip in and out of, guidelines that we supported on, blog posts which exist, social media posts out there, WhatsApp groups with all sorts of different members across the community, from parents and carers of those children living with type 1 through to men, women's team. So it's just spiraled into something that is just so amazing to see from my perspective, something I thought was needed based on the things that I'd faced and seen. And equally, it's not just, obviously I live in the UK, I'm from the UK, but it's not just in the United Kingdom where this is a problem and this is faced. The diabetes football community has reached, based on our foundations, most of the kind of English speaking countries out there. We've probably had a website visit from one of those countries. We've probably had an email from someone from those countries as well, because they're finding it just as tough about accessing sport and physical activity, and equally trying to find us that support and the way of managing it, and also that inspiration of being around others that are like them.
Are you a brand seeking an influencer to enhance trust and visibility with your audience? Or are you an elite athlete eager to feature in advertisements or promote products on social media? We're a unique platform connecting top-tier athletes with brands for impactful partnerships in your area. For brand managers, we simplify dealings with athletes and celebrities. For athletes, we offer opportunities to collaborate with like-minded brands. With a strong global community, Sport Endorse is your gateway to success. www.sportendorse.com, where brands can book a free demo on the platform, while athletes can sign up for free.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned sort of raising the profile and obviously how far the DFC community has grown. And it has grown significantly since its inception. Can you highlight some of the sort of major milestones or achievements of the organisation so far? Obviously, you mentioned that it's gone to most English countries. Is there anything else you'd want to highlight?
I think there's a few things in it really. We recently in November last year did our kind of Diabetes Awareness Month event where we brought all of our community together. We were at a venue in Essex. Probably over 200 people came. We did a game for adults playing against some social media influencers, former professional footballers, non-league players. And our team was made up of all adults with type 1 diabetes. So that was a really nice focal point to it. But equally, throughout that day, it was focused mostly on the families and the kids. And we had loads of coaching going on for the children who were able to play football with other type 1s like them in a venue that was set up then for families to hear from speakers that were impacted by type 1 diabetes about their stories, but also their kids to be able to play with other kids that were like them as well. So doing that for the first time on that scale was amazing and has given us a great opportunity to do that in the future. We were hoping to scale that out and do more of that kind of work as it seems to have a huge impact. We created the first UK's first ever all type 1 diabetes men's futsal team, which represents the UK at the European Futsal Championships for people with diabetes. It's often referred to as Dia-Euro. So we created that in 2018. We went to Slovakia that year. We went to Ukraine in 2019 to play in the tournament as well. And then last year in 2023, we went to Poland and got to the semi-finals for the first time. So that was pretty amazing. So the UK team is developing the men's team and bringing that opportunity it's an incredible carrot for people. You've got these non-league footballers, semi-professional footballers, some former pros and grassroots Sunday league players coming together to form this team, to represent their country, represent their condition. And that's just something that most people just dream of. And a chance to go to play abroad as well, play a sport that you love playing in another country and play in a tournament, which is covered on YouTube. And it's been covered on some of the TV companies have covered it in some of the countries we've been to as well. In Ukraine and Slovakia, I think it might have been covered by local TV. So these are just things that many of these men and guys growing up just dream of doing. So that's been quite special. And finishing fourth last year and losing the semi-final to one of the team that went on to win it was kind of like, well, you're probably not going to. Well, at this moment in time, we're not going to do much better than that. I mean, some of the teams that are involved are really out, like stretching the level of where it's at, and have got some professional futsal players or very high level futsal players with type 1 from their countries involved. So that's been amazing. The women's team, getting a women's team off the ground, allowing them to play their first fixture, again, incredible. Some of the guests we've had on our podcast, some of the standout people that are from the type 1 world, from the type 1 diabetes world, such as Gary Mabbott, who was the last player to play in the Premier League in England, living with type 1 in the 90s. We got to interview him. There's been so many amazing things, but I think bringing the community together through some of our days that we put on, where the men's team might be there, the women's team might be there, and the kids are there receiving coaching from the men's and women's team players as well, having type 1 coaches delivering to the next generation of type 1 children playing football is really special to watch. And it's quite impactful for for them as young people and their parents, but I think it's super impactful for the men and the women that are giving their time and giving back to that next generation as well. So loads of stuff has happened and gone on, but there's so much more for the future as well. So much to get excited by, and we've been inundated with people wanting to get involved and the opportunities to spread some of that work out further afield. So it's just, yeah, when I started a Twitter profile in 2017, to see where it is now 7 years later, and to the reach and the impact that it's had is just, I wouldn't have dreamed it. I couldn't have dreamed it up. When you write out ideas and plans, you just, you don't expect them to go in the direction that it's gone in. But I think it reflects the nature of where we are. There is a really large gap for this kind of work in chronic health, diabetes, in my particular space, that I think as an industry of sport and physical activity, I'd love to see more work being done.
No, absolutely. And by raising the sort of profile on type 1 diabetes as you have, you sort of hopefully are starting to get rid of these misconceptions. But going back to that, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about athletes with type 1 diabetes that you have encountered maybe yourself or seen people encounter, and how do you address them through your work with the community?
Yeah, I think all of the work that we're attempting to do is trying to tackle misconceptions and stigma out there, bringing our community together to grow our confidence, to then challenge the stigma and stereotypes is one way of doing that, but also getting that representation out there, sharing our stories, getting those stories out there into the mainstream, telling people what it's really like, getting that honest appraisal out there of what it looks like to be an athlete with type 1 diabetes is the best way we can do it. And getting into those mainstream settings and mainstream media is the way of challenging it and talking about it and getting it out there. Quite a few common misconceptions, and Jordan, you've probably might have seen or heard things in media, read things about the word diabetes, but we get a lot of diet related comments like you can't eat that, or you shouldn't be doing that, or perhaps you're going to be, does that give you, were you born with diabetes? Did you eat too many sweets to give you diabetes?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are common. See that a lot. And then there's a lot of reference to diet and lifestyle in the media when you hear the word diabetes. So you can understand that spreads itself into society's view of the condition. So you hear a lot of comments around that. My exposure has mostly been around the use of injections, actually, in the sporting environment, where people have made comments like, can I get a hit on that? Making the reference to the fact that they see an injection and they view it as maybe a performance enhancing drug, a steroid. So that's where injections have got a reputation of being in, when they're not in a hospital setting, they seem to be referred to as a drug user. When you see it out in the wild, if you like, outside of a hospital, people will see it as in the hands of a drug user. So you're quite often tarred with that, and people have said, shooting up heroin again. When they see the fact that I've been injecting insulin. So the only way you can continue to do that and challenge that is to put injections and the representation of injections in a different light, shed a different view on it, because the media is responsible for the representation or the portrayal of injections. And when you see it in TV programs, or in the past, you've seen it in TV programs, you only see injections either in a hospital or in the hands of a drug user. There's been some really positive storylines, though, in some of the soaps where you've seen type 1 diabetes actually being portrayed by characters, and characters living with type 1 diabetes, which I hope is helping to change that narrative of injections and the condition. So a lot of the things that I've heard is that through some of the work that I've done, I've also heard people being told they can't be physically active, they can't exercise because they live with diabetes, which is obviously completely false and incorrect. But these are the things and the comments which live out there, which can have huge ramifications for how someone feels about themselves, and then the likelihood they are to then enact the behavior that someone's commented on. If someone says you're a drug user because you've done an injection in a public environment, you're then not likely to do an injection in a public environment again. You're likely to feel funny about that. And actually, that might mean you don't make the best decisions for how to look after yourself, because you might wait to do an injection so you can find a private setting, which actually impacts on how you manage it. So there's a whole host of misconceptions out there about the word diabetes. We're trying to change the narrative. There's lots of things that we can do with our work. There's lots of things the media can do to help us change that. And ultimately, we need the media. It's not to point fingers and blame people for where we've been. It's to say, let's work together. Let's change this narrative. Let's make it a more accurate one and representation of diabetes, because where we've been isn't right and what people have heard and seen. But the media can play a really positive part in changing that and getting a better view of diabetes out there.
I didn't even think about the sort of injection side of it as well. I thought about the sort of diet side and that sort of thing, the injection side, and how that can affect someone. And then, the sort of snowballing effect that can have on someone as well is something to think about. Looking ahead, sort of what are your future goals, not only for your futsal career, but for the diabetes football community?
I mean, my own playing days, as unfortunately with where I'm at in terms of age, it's to play as high as I can for as long as I can. I'm still playing for Hartpury Futsal Club, which is in the top tier of English futsal, so in the National Futsal Series. It's been brilliant to be a part of that league. It's had in recent years been coverage. The coverage has been on BT, TNT, YouTube. So there's been lots of great positive coverage about the sport. We also managed to get a little bit in there for diabetes as well along the path. So being involved in that league, trying to play as high as I can for as long as I can, with my athletic abilities unfortunately moving in the wrong direction into my mid-30s, is what I'm hoping to do, but also to think about coaching and my next steps of moving on with my badges, potentially doing some more coaching, giving back in the sport of futsal and trying to grow futsal in areas where it means something to me. Certainly where I've grown up, I'd like to see futsal grow and the opportunities, because I learned a lot about who I am as a player from playing on the cages, playing on the local playground, not so much on the 11-a-side pitch. And I think a lot of that happens kind of street football, and street football is just like futsal, and there's a lot of similarities between the two. And I'd like to see how we can transfer some of that in the future. So there's some thinking that I have around that for the sport, and how we transfer the kids from that are playing on the streets in those cages and on corners, and just trying to take people on in those small environments to where that transfers into futsal. So there's some thinking for me around that. But with the diabetes football community, it is certainly to just continue the path that we've been on. We want to see the opportunities for the men's team to come and continue to participate in the tournament on European soil. We want the women's team to grow. We want to see more opportunities for them to play and come together. And we want to move around the country, and certainly in the United Kingdom, to doing more camps for the kids, which we've got a couple across the summer of 2024 and a summer and autumn of 2024. And we want to be able to do that and move around the country so more people can access the work that we do, get that opportunity to meet others, get the opportunity to learn, ask questions, feel more comfortable, get more confidence, and ultimately feel that they can go back and play football in any environment and not feel the barriers and potentially there's some of that stigma and stereotypes that we've talked about. Almost provide a little bit of a buffer to some of that with the peer support that we're providing and with the community we're providing, and being able to make that more agile and move it around to more locations is something that we really want to do with the diabetes football community, and continue to offer some of the resources that we do via our website with blog posts, social media posts, YouTube, podcasts, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, continue to grow, continue to raise the awareness, I think.
Yeah, and I think that funnels down to futsal in general as well, doesn't it? Because I think in the UK, futsal might not be as big as maybe it is in Europe. And is that something you wanna grow as well and sort of bring more awareness? Because obviously you said that you didn't really know about futsal when you would have wanted to when you were younger.
100%. The sport's got so much potential in the United Kingdom because of you can see its ability to connect with the market in Europe, where there's professional leagues, televised games on a regular basis in the likes of Spain and Italy and Portugal. And you can map the correlation between the success as well of futsal nations, where futsal's been heavily adopted in culture, into their success on the futsal court, but also the football pitch. Look at the way Spain play and look at what they do with futsal. They've just walked the Euros. Unfortunately for those watching from an English background, they beat everybody. They beat everybody in front of them, and they didn't look like losing a game really, apart from the game where they changed all of their players to rest them. At the Euros, they were the best team. They've got a rich history in futsal and football. Portugal, highly successful in futsal and football recently. Again, trophies in both. There's something in the way that futsal encourages you to be so comfortable on the ball that you can then use it as a sport in its own right and grow the success there of the sport. And it's brilliant that it is starting to grow in this country, and I'm hoping to see more of it. I want to see it'd be amazing to see it's become a viable channel for people to want to play for their national teams and grow the sport that way and give people opportunities to participate in it there, but also how it transfers then into the growth of English football, Welsh football, Scottish football, Northern Irish football, Irish football. Futsal has a real impact in those spaces. You look at somebody like who's just broke into the England team, Kobbie Mainoo. He literally referenced the fact that futsal was a big part of his development and made him very comfortable on the ball. Lots of pundits were remarking on how great he was on the ball and how comfortable he was on the ball, and he puts that to futsal. So how do we take some of those learnings from the players that are clearly referencing it as a great development tool, but also it's a really positive, viable option. If you don't feel that an 11-a-side game really suits you, futsal is an amazing place to go and play and now represent your country, travel around Europe playing. And I think that's where we need to get that awareness out there. So I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see the game grow. I'd like to be able to push it as well. And I think by actually using it as a niche within the diabetes industry and the diabetes world, we're helping it along in a different kind of way as well. The two things go quite well together, actually. The people living with diabetes being able to come off the court regularly to check their blood glucose levels and then go straight back on to play and rotate through the substitutions actually really lends itself to that. So yeah, I'm hoping that through the work we do in the diabetes world, we can raise the profile of futsal, and maybe they work together.
Yeah, work hand in hand, raising each other's profiles. So yeah, we'll move on to the sort of Sport Endorse's Fast Five, the segment where obviously give you five quick questions and try and answer them as quick as you possibly can. So if you could be another athlete, who would you be?
I think, because of my background, somebody else with type 1 diabetes, I would be keen to be Nacho Fernandez, who's just picked up the Euros, the highest, probably the most high-profile type 1 footballer on the planet, won loads of Champions Leagues. I can't remember how many it is with Real Madrid, and then also lots of trophies with Spain, Euros. I think he won the World Cup as well. So yeah, I would be where Nacho is.
I didn't even know he had type 1 diabetes. That's wow. What is a brand you use that people would be surprised by?
Oh, I think it's probably, we'll shout out a couple of the technology companies because they're brands in their own right that obviously support athletes with type 1 diabetes. So Omnipod and Dexcom, Omnipod is the insulin pump that I use, and Dexcom is the sensor which monitors blood glucose levels. And the two have now got to a place where they talk to each other. So my insulin pump makes automatic adjustments based on the glucose levels that the sensor reads, so they're talking to each other. So the fact that we've got to that level of complexity and it's doing some of the work for me in managing type 1 diabetes, there are two brands that definitely deserve a shout out for the work they've done together as two separate entities to now make a system which talks to each other.
Absolutely. If you were not an athlete, what would you be?
I suppose I'm lucky in some way because I'm obviously I do a dual career really. For most of the time I've been there was a period of time where I was probably more athlete than anything else. But actually I probably do the thing that I would like to do as a career now. So I work for the UK's largest type 1 diabetes charity. So I work for JDRF UK, soon to be called Breakthrough T1D. And my job is community partnerships and events. So I basically organise community-focused events across the United Kingdom, as well as then get involved in partnership conversations with individuals and organisations with the basis of trying to improve people's lives and their experiences living with type 1 diabetes. So I kind of do the thing that I would do if I wasn't an athlete, and I'd get to do the athlete bit on the side still now. So it's, yeah.
Can't complain.
Blessed.
Then, can you?
No, blessed, I would say.
What is your favourite movie?
Oh, favourite movie. I've got a bit of a family history of Second World War and war films. So I really like Saving Private Ryan. Is an amazing war film that I like. I think there's a few that I really like. You know, those like The Pursuit of Happiness as well is an amazing film to get you sort of feel good vibes from it.
What is your party trick, if you have one?
Oh, party trick. I've done this before after a few drinks, but it's very football related. I can balance a football on my head and walk around with it quite comfortably. So it's a bit of a laugh when you've had a few drinks and someone's got a ball lying around. I just literally stick it on my forehead and I'll walk around the bar with it on my head, or do something else stupid whilst the ball's balancing on my head. So yeah, I'd say that's probably a football related party trick. I suppose it goes naturally with being a futsal player. You've got a few tricks in the locker, and that's one of them. Bit of a party trick.
That's a good trick to have. And obviously, before we wrap up, how can our listeners sort of get involved with the diabetes football community, or maybe support your cause, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so if anyone wants to check it out or get in contact with us, it's the diabetesfootballcommunity.com is the website. So hopefully straightforward to find us there. And equally, if you search on Instagram, it's the Diabetes Football Community. Facebook, the Diabetes Football Community. On Twitter or X, it's at TDFC Diabetes. So yeah, there's the best places to find the organisation, and I think the best places to find me personally are probably, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Bright, and then on Instagram and X, I'm Chris Brighty1. So they're all the places that I tend to post both about being an athlete and some of my professional work in the diabetes industry.
Great, and yeah, absolutely check him out. And I nearly forgot the question our last guest left. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Oh, it's really poignant for me, just because of the challenges that I faced as a kid. I would say it's going to be hard. This is not going to be an easy journey that you're on. You've got a lot of stuff to face that people won't understand. Take it on the chin. Be positive. Learn from all the mistakes. Don't treat them as that they last forever. They're learnings. Mistakes are learnings. But one day you'll get there. You'll enjoy the thing that you've been working for, and just try and be positive. And yeah, take the knockbacks on the chin and learn from them as best you can.
Wow. And what would your question be for our next guest?
So my question for the next guest would be, who or what has been the greatest influence on your sporting or athletic career?
And how would you answer that yourself?
And I think I would answer that by saying the greatest influence, both positively and negatively, has been living with a chronic health condition on my athletic career. I've had to work very hard to do what I've been doing. It's given me a lot of extra motivation and drive that I don't know if I would have had if I hadn't have had the condition. I don't know if I'd have been as determined to like achieve, because I'm basically trying to prove that type 1 diabetes isn't going to hold me back. But equally, in saying that, physiologically, it's a medical condition which is not designed to deliver at the elite levels. It's a tough condition to manage. So it has at times obviously had a negative impact as well. And just to, I've tried trying to navigate it, but it would be the biggest thing that's influenced me, 100%. There's obviously positive role models that you look up to and things that have influenced you and your thinking. And
going with a question, obviously that is.
Yeah, I think the condition itself is probably the biggest influence. There are role models, and the person I already mentioned him, Gary Mabbott, in the 90s, played in the Premier League with type 1 diabetes. He was the person that in the darkest moments when I was like, this is so hard and I can't get this, I was like, Gary did it, so I can do it, or I can at least get to my ceiling and my level, and I'll be able to play this sport because Gary did it at the top. So yeah, role models. And you got to shout out people like your parents when you're living with a medical condition like that as well, because they are the most incredible people to be able to influence your career, influence the trajectory, because they've got to look after a medical condition and you all at the same time. So without them, none of it would have happened as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and learning all about the sort of diabetes football community. And for everyone at home, be sure to check out them and support their incredible work. And until next time, goodbye. Thank you, Chris.
Cheers, Jordan.
Thank you for watching the Athlete Sit Down, brought to you by Sport Endorse. To book any of our athletes featured on our podcast, contact us via our website, www.sportendorse.com, or via our email, hello@sportendorse.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes.